So where does that go?
Thank you so much. And thank you all for welcoming me into your space. My name is Gauri Patel. I'm here from NYC Votes. And as mentioned, excited to talk today with you all about ranked choice voting, how to vote, what's going to be on the ballot, and all the resources and tools you may need to equip yourselves and your communities to vote in this primary election. So with that, just give me some grace in sharing my screen. And you can let me know if you can see the full screen view at the moment. Does that look good? Awesome, awesome. Okay, so today we're just going to cover a couple of topics here, refresher or for some folks new information around ranked choice voting, again, how to vote, what's on the ballot, and we'll end with some voting rights and resources. So let's talk about ranked choice voting. Before each section, I would love to just offer a couple definitions of terms that we use in the civic world and space that aren't always defined or maybe accessible to folks. So we always like to just define those. And if any questions come up with any of these terms, please feel free to ask. So I'm going to be mentioning primary election, which is an election that decides a party's choice to run in the general election. So which candidate we want to nominate from our political party to run in the general election. A candidate then is a person running for office. And ranked choice voting is voting in order of choice where candidates are eliminated in rounds and a winner is chosen with the most votes that are left. And so it's a ranking structure we'll talk about in detail. Here we have a view of ranked choice voting across the country. So ranked choice voting has been used in a lot of different states, and it's a growing sort of approach and structure to voting. It's reached over 64 American jurisdictions. 13 million voters have used ranked choice voting. There are folks that have voted using ranked choice voting across different countries and states or seas using a ballot. And we also know that in the Academy Awards, a ranked choice voting structure was used and implemented back in 2021, where the most people of color and diverse nominations we saw in that Oscars. So we'll talk a bit more in depth as to how it relates to New York City. So New York City adopted ranked choice voting back in 2019 as part of a ballot measure. So that means voters themselves chose to switch to ranked choice voting with a 73.5% passing support with this system. It is here because voters, again, chose it, not because of candidates or other special interest groups that we see influencing the election structure and space. So this is, of course, the second time, as you may know, that we're using ranked choice voting here in New York City. The first time we used it was in 2021 during our primary and special elections. So back in 2021, we saw that ranked choice voting was highly adopted by a lot of voters, with 88.3% of voters using the ranking structure on their ballots to rank different candidates that they were going to vote for. So we saw a great rate in which people were using ranked choice voting. We're excited to share more education and information for this time around. So this year, in 2023, New York City is going to be using ranked choice voting in our primary elections, which is why we're here today. Now, I'd love to share with you all a informational video that sort of captures what this is. So let me know if you can hear this properly. Let me just make sure that it's the right language here. Give me 1 second. Oops. I'm sorry about that. I had this video linked in another language, so I'm just going to switch it back to English and share it with you all. Okay.
There's a new way for New Yorkers to have their say in city elections. A way that gives voters more choices and can lead to more diverse winners. It's called ranked choice voting. 74% of New York voters chose to use it in primary and special elections for city offices: mayor, public advocate, comptroller, borough president, and city council. You won't see ranked choice voting in general elections or elections for state or national offices. But in ranked choice voting elections, you can now rank up to 5 of your favorite candidates for each office. Here's how ranked choice voting works. On your ballot, you'll see candidates listed in rows and numbered rankings in columns. Pick your first choice and completely fill in the oval next to their name under the first column. Like always, you can just vote for your one favorite candidate and submit your ballot. But you might like several people. If you have a second choice, fill in the oval next to their name under the second column. Do the same thing for your third, fourth, and fifth choices if you have them. A few don'ts. Don't rank the same candidate more than once. It won't help them, and it takes away your chance to rank the others who are running. Don't give the same rank to multiple candidates. It could disqualify your ballot. Don't worry. This is a new process, and you can always ask a poll worker for help, or for a new ballot if you make a mistake. So, how do ballots get counted with ranked choice voting? If one candidate gets more than 50% of everyone's first choice votes, they win the election right away. That's it. If no candidate gets more than 50%, ballots will be counted in rounds. Round by round, the candidate with the fewest votes is eliminated. So, if your top-rated candidate is eliminated, your vote goes to your next highest choice. This keeps going until only 2 candidates remain. The person with the most votes wins. Ranked choice voting is already popular in many cities around the country because voters find that it helps more voices be heard. Now it's our turn. Get answers to your questions and learn more at nyccfb.info/RCV.
Awesome. So I'm just going to go over a quick summary of what you all heard in the video. So ranked choice voting is used as a way for us to elect our representatives. We can rank up to 5 candidates in order of our preference instead of just choosing one candidate, right? And our votes are calculated in rounds. We'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. I also want to emphasize that ranked choice voting is used in special and primary elections for city offices only, right? So mayor, public advocate, comptroller, borough president, and city council. It is not used in general elections. So the election that we'll participate in November will not be using ranked choice voting. We don't use ranked choice voting in federal state offices like the president, Congress, or governor, nor do we use it in local offices such as district attorney and judgeships. So again, reviewing steps for marking the ballot. This is really important to educate ourselves and those around us, just because if they are filled out with errors, there's a risk in which the ballot can be thrown out. So we want to make sure that we're filling out the ballot correctly. We have this grid that we'll encounter at the polls on our ballot, where we'll see the candidates listed, and then we'll have 5 ranking columns to make our vote in. And so we pick our first choice candidate in the left, completely fill out the oval before moving into the second and third, and so on. We want to make sure that we're not giving multiple candidates the same rank. This will invalidate the ballot because we're not sure, there's no way to tell which candidate between, for instance, in this case, blue and green, that our vote is preferred for. So with an error like this, the ballot will not be counted. There's also an error in which there's a double ranking or duplicate ranking happening. So if we rank the same candidate from multiple ranks, your vote will only count for that first choice rank, but we also would consider this an error. So we want to make sure that we are just using one ranking column per candidate. Our website has a really cool tool for a practice ballot that's available in 13 different languages. And so after the presentation, I'm happy to share some links. Y'all can go in and practice filling out a ballot and checking out that tool. As also mentioned in the video, we're going to talk a little bit about how the counting process works for ranked choice voting. So in the first round, we see that votes are counted per candidate, right? And so in this example, we're looking for a candidate that meets that 50% or majority mark for votes. And if none of the candidates meet that threshold in the first round, then we move on to the second round and so on. And so in this example, none of the 6 candidates received the majority of the vote. And so we're going to take a look at the lowest number of votes that candidate yellow received and redistribute those votes to the second highest ranking that those ballots had. And so the candidate of yellow will be eliminated, and those votes will then be redistributed to the second choice that was on that ballot. This process then continues. So we'll take a look at the results in the second round and notice that the green candidate is now the lowest, the candidate with the lowest numbers of votes. And so those votes will then go to the next highest ranking, so on and so forth until one candidate meets that 50% majority and wins the election. So I want to talk about, before we pause for questions maybe in this section, talk about what are the benefits of ranked choice voting. So there are 3 distinct benefits that we want to highlight for you all here as it relates to ranked choice voting compared to maybe a single choice vote, right? So the first one is that our voters get more say in who is elected. The second is that candidates are more likely to appeal to one another and to voters rather than attack one another. And lastly, voters elect more diverse and representative candidates. We'll show some examples of that as well. So voters get more say in who is elected. How does this happen? So when if our first choice or top choice vote does not win, our vote then can be used and counted for the next highest candidate that we've ranked. So we get to choose multiple candidates that we prefer. And so if our first choice candidate doesn't win, right, our vote is still being counted towards our next choice. Candidates are more likely to appeal to voters and not attack each other. You may see or notice campaigns working together. Maybe somebody running for office asks you to be their first choice, but if not, maybe they want to ask you to be their second choice instead. And so it's not an all or nothing for candidates that are running for office. They may work together with other people running in the district and really be able to work together to offer voters a chance to rank them in preference. So there could be multiple preferences that we see in some of like the advertising and campaigning that happens in ranked choice voting elections. And then lastly, voters elect more diverse and representative candidates. Elected officials have been more representative of communities that they serve. We've seen an increase percentage of candidates of color running for office, an increased probability of women candidates and women of color running and winning office seats. And we saw in 2021 that New York City elected the most diverse city council it's seen. So a quick check-in then, is RCV is only used in primary elections for city offices. If folks could maybe do like a thumbs up or down for yes or no. Yeah, I see some nods too. So yes, RCV is only used in primary elections for city offices. So we're going to go through a couple of frequently asked questions as it relates to RCV that we hear a lot from voters on. The first is, can I still vote just for one candidate? And the answer is yes. You can still just vote for your first choice candidate. However, if you choose to do that, you wouldn't be utilizing the benefits of RCV, right? The opportunity to rank multiple candidates and have your vote be counted towards another candidate if that first choice candidate does not win the majority of votes in that first round, right? Do you have to rank a total of 5 candidates? So do you have to use all of the ranking places? And the answer is no. You can rank up to 5 candidates, but you may not want to rank every single one of them, and that's okay too. And does ranking 5 candidates mean that you have 5 different votes? The answer is no, right? So your vote only counts once, but it counts for the highest active candidate on your ballot. And so again, if your first choice is eliminated, then your vote gets sort of redistributed or moved to the next highest ranking candidate on your ballot. So another quick question, do you need to rank every candidate? See some nodding. No, right? You don't need to rank every candidate on your ballot. So I'm going to pause here before we jump into how to vote to see if anyone has questions of anything I just mentioned so far. Feel free to raise your hand or unmute. Put your question in the chat. Donna, I see a hand up.
Yeah, so if your candidate doesn't get eliminated, does your vote still stay for that, your first candidate? Okay.
Yep. If that candidate, unless the candidate is the one with the lowest number of votes in the first round, then they would be considered eliminated. Otherwise, your vote would still be with them.
Oh.
Awesome. Any other questions or comments? Great. So we'll move on to how to vote, talking about some of the mechanics of voting. So some terms that you'll hear in this section, first is to register, which is to sign up formally as a voter. We are going to be talking about voting absentee, so an official ballot that is mailed to someone who cannot vote in person. Polling site is a place to vote. Early voting is a voting time scheduled before Election Day. New York City has early voting starting on June 17th, so we'll talk about that opportunity. A ballot is the piece of paper or electronic document that we're using to vote and cast our ballot or cast our vote on. An affidavit ballot is used as an alternative ballot that is used if there are any issues with registration. For instance, if you registered, but maybe it didn't go through the system, or you get to a polling site and they don't have you listed, you can still vote using an affidavit ballot. And if your registration does go through, that ballot will be counted. And if for some reason your registration was not inputted or did not count towards, there was an error in the registration, or if there's any issue, then that affidavit ballot will just be used to register you to vote, since it collects similar information, the same information as the registration form. And lastly, cast your vote, which is the choices we're going to make on our ballot. So first, we're going to register to vote. So quick refresher, 3 requirements to register to vote: must be a US citizen. In New York City or in New York, we can be 16 or 17 years old to pre-register and 18 to formally register, and having a mailing address. When registering to vote, folks will be asked for an identification. So that can be the last 4 digits of a social security, a driver's license number, or a state ID or a non-driver's ID. If that identification is not required when initially registering though. So if you don't have any of those pieces of identification while you're registering, you can check that last box that says, I do not have a New York State driver's license or social security number at the moment. And you may be then asked, when you first go and vote in person, you may be asked to provide a piece of identification that can include any of the following. So a current and valid photo ID, a valid New York non-driver's license ID. It could be a paycheck with your current name and address, utility bill, bank statement, government check, and so on. Something that can both verify your name and address. For folks that might not have a permanent residence or a home or experiencing homelessness, you can still register to vote using a shelter, a school, an address of a friend or a relative, or anywhere that this person can be found. And so the one caveat here is that it has to be an address in which you can receive mail from the BOE, the Board of Elections. And important for this election, we must be a part of a political party in order to vote in a primary election. So in New York City, we have something called closed primary system. That means that we have to be part of, have selected to enroll in a political party in order to participate in the primary election for that party. So now we'll talk about how to cast our ballots this time around. So there are 3 ways to cast our ballot in New York State: Election Day, early voting, and absentee or voting by mail. Early voting is going to take place Saturday, June 17th to Sunday, June 25th. And important to note that our early voting site is likely different from the Election Day poll site. And so it's really important to check your poll site depending on what day you decide to go vote to make sure that that address is the one for you. And times may differ for early polling sites. And so again, making sure you look that up, and we can give you a link for that to confirm the address and the hours. Election Day then is, as someone mentioned earlier, June 27th, Tuesday. The polls are open 6 to 9 p.m., 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. And again, making sure that you check your poll site. It may be different from the early poll site. If you decide to vote by mail, the deadline for requesting an absentee ballot, so first we have to request an absentee, then we have to fill it out and send it back. So that first step of requesting is due Monday, June 12th. And there's a link. Again, we can provide more resources on how to request an absentee ballot. You will have to select a reason as to which you need an absentee ballot. And the second step then is to receive that, fill it out using the instructions, and mail it or drop it off at any early voting or election day site by election day, so June 27th. It does not have to be the one that you're registered at, so it can be any early voting or election day poll site. And as you have been reminded, these are key election deadlines. We have our absentee ballot request deadline on June 12th, early voting and the first day of early voting and the voter registration deadline is June 17th. Early voting will extend to June 25th with election day on June 27th. That's when we need to have our absentee ballots either dropped off or mailed back to the Board of Elections. And so then lastly, primary election day is June 27th. Pausing there before we move into a section to talk about what is going to be on our ballot, what offices. Any questions about how to vote, logistics of voting, registering, anything like that? Great. If it comes to mind, always welcome to put it in the chat.
There is a question in the chat.
Oh, okay.
Great.
Oh, thank you.
So I can read that to you. This is from Katie. Can you talk about what is a valid reason for requesting an absentee ballot? I believe is expanded during the pandemic. Is it different now?
So this is a great question, and I may have to follow up with it's changing all the time. So let me follow up with a specific answer to this, but I believe that the pandemic exemption for having a reason is expired. So now we are seeing the need to select a reason. For instance, if you're going to be out of the state, or if there is a disability or a sickness associated with the reason that you're requesting an absentee ballot. I will send a link to more information for us to read up on that. Thank you. Great. So let's talk a little bit about what's on the ballot. We're going to be talking about city council. City council is a lawmaking part of our city government. District attorney is the top legal officer in the district. Party positions are people who help run political parties in their districts and communities, and districts themselves are the sections or neighborhoods where an elected official will be representing and performing their duties. So again, here's a short list of what we'll be voting for. Our team is really focused on city council. As part of our outreach, we know this because we're doing this because our city council races will be using ranked choice voting, but district attorney, civil court, and some other party positions may also be on the ballot. This election is a little patchy, so not every district has an election, but we know district attorneys are going to be up for election in 3 of the boroughs, the Bronx, Queens, and Staten Island. We know that I believe 20 or 21 out of the 51 city council districts have elections. So not every city or district does have an election for a city council. So again, really important to look up your address to make sure that there is an election happening or a contested primary, and you can find this in the voter guide as well. So talking through a little bit of responsibilities, again, our city council is responsible for creating the laws at the local level. They serve up to 4 years and can serve up to 2 consecutive terms for us. They are responsible for negotiating and voting on bills. Up at the top, you can see New York City has a $90 billion budget. It's a very massive, massive budget, and city council negotiates and approves our city budget. So it's really important, right? They also work to monitor other city agencies and make decisions around the growth and development of our city. And also calling out district attorneys, again, the top prosecutor for their counties. They also serve up to 4 years, and there are no term limits for district attorneys. So they decide which cases to prosecute. They oversee all criminal prosecutions, investigate criminal conduct, and sort of hold a lot of decision-making power as it relates to our justice system. So we'll end with a section around voting rights. We'll talk a little bit about having a right is a rule about a person, what is allowed to do or have in society. An interpreter is someone that can convert speech from one language to another. A poll worker is someone at the poll site that can help people, fill out their ballots and direct folks at the poll site. A ballot marking device is a machine available at the poll site that can assist folks to fill out their ballot. And accessibility is providing equal access to everything for people with disabilities throughout the voting process. So a quick video on voting rights here in New York City.
Know your rights. Under the Voting Rights Act, New Yorkers may bring an interpreter to the voting booth. This could be a friend, family member, or poll worker, but can't be your employer or union rep. You'll both be required to sign a form. All poll sites must be ADA compliant. Look for signs that mark the accessible entrances. You can also request use of a ballot marking device. And you have the right to ask election workers for help or bring voter information with you. To learn more, go to participate.nyc.gov. Know your rights.
Great. So having a right to vote in your language, again, bringing an interpreter or a friend to a poll booth, that can be a family member, a family or a friend or a poll worker. It just cannot be an employer or a union representative. And language assistance is available in multiple languages at select poll sites, depending on where you are in the city. And again, can provide you links to double check where that will be available for you based on your address. And also asking for a ballot marking device can also provide audio to fill out the ballot in Chinese, Bengali, Spanish, or Korean. We'll also provide where to go if there's any issues in terms of making your vote at the poll site. So there is a hotline in which you can call if there's any feeling of intimidation or influence, or standing in line. If you're in line, you should be able to vote no matter what. And so if for any case anyone feels uncomfortable, there are resources in which you can call in your language to get assistance. And lastly, as mentioned, voting accessibility. You have a right to fill out an absentee ballot if you're visually impaired or have a disability that requires you to have an accessible ballot, and you can request one or call for support and or ask for a ballot marking device at the poll site that can provide audio, braille, high contrast screens, and different tools that can help folks that are experiencing a disability cast their vote. So last quick question, can you ask a friend, family member, or poll worker for help voting? I see a nod. Yeah, we can. Also, just a reminder, especially with ranked choice voting, if you make a mistake, refrain from crossing anything out and just ask for another ballot, and you have a right to ask for help to get another ballot to start over at the poll site as well. So with that, we'll leave you with a bunch of resources that can be found at nycvotes.org. That includes an online version of our voter guide. It's going to include candidate videos and statements. It includes tools like how to fill out your ballot, working towards like an interactive, how ballots are counted in ranked choice voting like we went over. There's also going to be a candidate comparison tool where we can look up the different candidates that are running in our districts and kind of compare and contrast based on what issues that they find most important. All of the information that I shared today is also on this website, and it is accessible by screen reader. And again, the online version of the voter guide will be available soon. With these are all from our site as well. So the main nycvotes.org can lead you to checking if you're registered, checking your poll site, checking the times, where you can vote, when you can vote, and who specifically is going to be on your ballot based on your address and where you are, your district. So with that, thank you, very much appreciated. We'll stick around for any questions. And if I can jump in.